Hello guys, this is Paul with VHScollector.com, your analog archivists, and today I'm going to make a video I should have made a really long time ago. Probably should have made it back in December when these silly little auctions started to pop up. Right now I'm looking at the sold listings on the Goldin website, and so as you can see they have VHSDNA graded items and IGS graded items. But we do know that VHSDNA does have some sort of relationship with Goldin, because Goldin uploads videos for VHSDNA on their YouTube channel, of course. So if you go on the Goldin YouTube channel, you'll see at least 2 videos on there with VHSDNA and Cole and all that. So yeah, there's some sort of connection there. I don't know what it is, but anyway, my point is that there's a lot at stake here, so both companies can definitely gain from publicity. And this is basically what they were doing here with these auctions. And so I just want to show these auctions and kind of point out what's incredibly wrong with them. I think that's incredibly important. And so here are the 3 top ones. Now, these listings had gotten a lot of publicity. If we go onto the TMZ website, we can see vintage VHS tape expected to pull in $60K at auction. There's a few things that kind of worry me. So it says an unopened VHS copy of Star Wars Episode 4 is getting some love on the auction block. It is expected to fetch $60,000. Goldin Auctions is hosting an online auction featuring a ton of vintage VHS tapes, and the star of the show is from a galaxy far, far away. The copy of Star Wars A New Hope is a first edition VHS tape. Now you see that? First edition VHS tape. And it goes on to say, and includes a gray tape head, first edition stereo only red label, a 1984 sleeve, and a first edition CBS Fox watermarks. All these details mean absolutely nothing. They mean absolutely nothing. What does it matter that it's a first edition stereo only? It doesn't even say that on here, stereo only. It says hi-fi stereo, but whatever. When Cole started grading these things, he just started making up stuff to make it sound more rare. This is the red label. This is the gray tape head, which is really a tape guard. That's what I call it. Of course, the gray tape guard was really to combat piracy. There were smaller independent distributors that also did that. So anyway, means absolutely nothing. First edition stereo only means absolutely nothing. A 1984 sleeve, it's like, who cares? Who cares? The biggest problem I'm having is that this and the previous auction listing keep touting it as a first edition VHS tape. A first edition VHS tape, right? That sounds like something you must have, the very first home video release of Star Wars. In fact, I believe it says it on here. Where does it say it? The tape has lots of history. When it was originally sold, it was the first time someone could watch the film at home. No, this is not the first release of Star Wars on home video. That first release was in 1982, June of 1982, and it was a video rental library release, which actually had a serial number on the back. That is, in fact, the very first release, but of course, those might be more rare and difficult to come by sealed. So what does Cole do? He kind of touts these CBS Fox ones as the original first release. Let me just go back to these listings here. So this is the original first listing that went for $57,600. Look at the titles of these. So this one says 1977 Star Wars sealed VHS tape. And this is very misleading because it leads the viewer of the auction to think that this release came out the same year the movie was released to theaters. Anyone who's considering buying Star Wars on VHS tape for thousands of dollars would already know that this movie came out in 1977. So having the year up here like this is very misleading, right? Let's go into this and see what it says. Alright guys, so this is that listing, that original listing that supposedly went for $57,600. And I say supposedly because I'm very skeptical of things like this, because both Goldin and VHSDNA have a lot to gain from publicity of a videotape that went for this amount of money. But let's see what it says down here. Encapsulated and graded mint 9.6 with a seal rating of A+ by VHSDNA. Offered here is a sealed and graded VHS copy of Star Wars released theatrically May 25th, 1977. And it goes on to talk about Star Wars. I mean, is that even really necessary at this point? People who haven't seen Star Wars even know what it's about. This presented copy features a UPC sticker on tape. Doesn't matter. and a UPC on sleeve, doesn't matter, and displays white horizontal watermarks, who cares? VHSDNA condition report, whatever. Yeah, so I always felt like putting this in the title was incredibly misleading. This video is from 1984, right? So this is the card that VHSDNA uses, and as you can see, they make no effort to put the distributor on there, and they don't put the year of this actual release anywhere on there. It's just the release of the movie. The year of the release and the distributor are the most crucial points of this release, and also the catalog number for the video. These are the identifiable markers for a specific VHS release, and as you can see, none of them are on here. I believe he has more details on the back of the card. This doesn't show the back of the card, but he has things like the distributor on the back, but shouldn't it really be on the front? I mean, that is so incredibly important, and it shouldn't have the year of the release of the movie. That's sort of irrelevant. I mean, grading is really about the specific release, not the details of the actual movie, its production or anything like that. I find that to be a really odd choice. Let's go back to the other listings. So this is the one that was in the TMZ story, which only sold for $40,000 allegedly, and now look how they do the title. 1984 Star Wars, first release, with gray tape head and all that other stuff. So, alright, so 1984 Star Wars, first release. This is the problem I'm having again. So 1984, the year of the release, this is not a first release Star Wars. Again, they're being very deceptive here. You remember how that first listing said 1977? Which, in my opinion, really is them trying to mislead people to think that's a first edition. So they probably got crap for that, and so now they're putting the release year of the video cassette in the listing instead of 1977, the theatrical release year. But instead, now they actually put right in the listing title, first release. So of course, some people could say they're playing sort of semantics, of course. Maybe it's the first release with the gray tape head and all this nonsense. Listen, it's deceptive. It's very misleading. This is not a first release of Star Wars. Again, first release was in June of 1982 under 20th Century Fox Video logo. That's important to note. And it was intended for only rental. It wasn't until later that fall did a mass market VHS release of Star Wars hit the market. And that release was still under the 20th Century Fox logo. Right? So this is not a first release. Now, if someone actually spent $40,000 under the impression that it was a first release, they were scammed. Let's see what it says down here. Encapsulated and graded near mint 8 with seal. Offered here is a first release, comma, 1984 VHS release of Star Wars, right? Again, there it is, first release. Then it says 1984 VHS release. I point out the comma because now it's changing thought, the sentence, right? So it's not a first release 1984 VHS. Because, well, if it was, who cares? If it was, people want the very, very first release, not the very first release of 1984. That's just stupid, right? So I think that's sort of something important to point out. And of course, it goes into the history again of Star Wars, or like backstory again. Is that even necessary? Down here it says, the presented copy is a first edition. Again, it says it, a first edition, and includes a gray tape head. A first edition stereo only, and it goes through this whole spiel again with red label and all these things that mean absolutely nothing. And look at this. I found this to be incredibly interesting. Right on the back, Cole has a sticker that reads first edition. So he has this little holographic sticker. And isn't it funny how it covers up information on the back cover, right? Like, how stupid could you be? Why would you put any label or anything on top of the casing, blocking any information on the back of the sleeve? You're a moron. This stuff is common sense, but obviously Cole has a problem with it. Now, look, we have some interesting markers on here this time around. This one says 1984 sleeve. I don't think the other one said that. Early 1984 sleeve. Okay. First edition vertical CBS Fox watermarks. First edition stereo only red label. All these first editions mean absolutely nothing. And it's so incredibly misleading. People don't want a first edition gray tape head. Like, is there anyone on the market specifically looking for a first edition gray tape head release of Star Wars? Are you kidding me? Is anyone specifically on the market for a stereo-only red label VHS release of Star Wars? No, it's stupid. Those are such trivial details. People want a very first release of Star Wars that hit the market, and this is not it. But putting all these first edition markers on here is so incredibly misleading. It's pretty disgusting, actually. And Goldin doesn't really care. I mean, they're getting some kind of money out of this unless there's something sketchy going on in the background, sort of like what happened with WADA games, right? That's certainly a possibility, but I don't know. Oh, look, wow, gray tape head. Oh my god, I must have that. So stupid. Alright guys, so now we're going to look at this third Star Wars listing. This one is graded by IGS, and we know those people definitely don't know what they're doing over there. This one says 1984, and as you can see, it's very similar. The listing title is very similar to the previous one. 1984 Star Wars. This one says first print in parentheses here, as you can see, sealed VHS tape, has some sort of grade on there. So again, we see this first print on here. This one sold for allegedly $34,000. Let's click into this and see what's going on here. All right, so here we have this IGS release, and on the top it actually reads first print of 1984. Again, it's just like, who cares? Like, seriously, why does that matter? A first print of 1984. See, they're so desperate to get that phrase on the grade, first print. In their desperation to give this tape some value, they find any way they could to put the term first print on here. Certainly it's not a first print of Star Wars. It might be a first print of 1984. Of course, I find it to be difficult to say that with any absolute certainty. And so I wonder how they're even getting their information. Someone as a company as dysfunctional as IGS, certainly. Let's read what it says down here. Encapsulated and graded. Shown here is a sealed and graded 1984 first print VHS copy of Star Wars. Again, it's misleading people to think that this is a very first release of Star Wars sealed, which of course it is absolutely not. So between VHSDNA and IGS, these people aren't just innocently making mistakes, at least in my opinion. This is just my opinion, and I'm entitled to it. And I'm telling you guys, it's just my opinion, of course, that this is not an accident. That they would put terms in the listings that say first release or first print when they're certainly not. And the way they go about it is very sneaky, certainly. And you notice how you don't see any actual first release Star Wars on this first page. You don't. None of these are first releases of Star Wars, right? But they do actually have one on here. But before we get into that, let me look at these other listings here. I love how this 1984 Star Wars factory sealed tape, excellent grade apparently, a 9.6, and it only goes for $5,000. Seriously? The other one went for how much? $57,000. And now that's what it is? Give me a break. What does this one say? Let's just check this out. It says digitally mastered, so it's a little bit different, right? I guess this is a later 1984 release or something. Again, it's like, why does it even matter? Like, if I wanted a first edition Star Wars, it would be a June 1982 release. It would not be one of these. Now, again, the reason they're pushing these CBS Fox videos is because they're so much more easier to find sealed, right, than the other ones, than the 1982 releases under the 20th Century Fox video label. Here's something interesting. Let me show you guys. So we're going to go to page 3 on here. And look what I found here. 1977 Star Wars A New Hope. Right? This is the original, very first release of Star Wars on home video. Not CBS Fox or any of those other listings we looked at. This is the very first one right here. This is actually a really nice release of it too. So as you can see, it came in a clamshell because it was intended for video rental. And if you look on the back, it's got the watermark on there. I mean, the serial number, of course. So that's good. This is the first release of Star Wars. 20th Century Fox Video. It was only called 20th Century Fox Video for barely a year, right? It went from Magnetic Video to 20th Century Fox Video. So mid-year of 1982, they made some sort of deal, partnership with CBS. And so they don't start using the CBS name and logo, I think, until the following year, the end of 1982. But anyway, this is the very first release of Star Wars on home video anywhere, right? So this is a pretty cool release. So let's see what he has on the card back here. What does it say? 1982, 20th Century Fox release, first edition, video rental library, copy, matching serial, clam, and tape. Alright, so anyway, this is an important release. This one actually says first edition too. So how many of these different releases of Star Wars actually have first edition stickers on them, right? There's only one first edition of a book, right? then you have first printings, second printings, and things like that, but there are only just that initial release. So here's something to take into consideration, because I also am very interested in books. Although I'm not a rare book collector, I know a bit about it. This is also just common sense what I'm about to say anyway. But back in the day, the initial print run of a book was quite small because publishers didn't know how well it would do. Because of this, it makes them a lot more rare. Not because there's a smaller print run, but because it's also the very first release of that book. So it makes them quite desirable. And of course, subsequent releases would have a much bigger print, right? Movies were a lot different. The initial print run was really determined by how well the movie did in theaters. So that's why you see so many movies on VHS that have, 5, 15, 20 million copies that were printed initially, right? So if you actually look on this list here, you can actually see some of the numbers of copies that were sold for these movies. So this is the best-selling VHS tapes of all time on IMDb. And so number one, as we already know, is The Lion King at 32 million. Snow White, 27 million. Titanic, 25. Aladdin, 25. Independence Day, 22. Beauty and the Beast, 22. Jurassic Park, 21. Toy Story. These are massive, massive numbers, right? It's just incredible. Toy Story 2, a sequel, even sold for almost 17 million copies. I keep saying 1,000 because it just still blows my mind that there are so many millions of copies of these movies out there. It's just absolutely incredible. E.T., 15 million copies. E.T. is usually considered the very first big sell-through hit on the video market, other than Jane Fonda's Workout. But if you put that aside, E.T. is the first feature-length film to be a sell-through hit in the video market. Even Aladdin 2, Return of Jafar, a direct-to-video release, sold 15 million copies. Lion King 2, direct-to-video, 15 million copies. That's incredible, right? How the Grinch Stole Christmas with Jim Carrey, 12 million, 13 million almost. Home Alone, 11 million. These are massive numbers. Look, here you see Batman. I keep seeing sealed and graded copies of Batman from VHSDNA and IGS. 10.5 million copies sold. Could you imagine how many sealed copies of this movie are out there on video cassette? There's got to be so many out there. So I want you guys to take these numbers into perspective. Because although there may only be a few sealed and graded copies right now, as people become more familiar with VHS grading, because obviously this is not going to go away, there's going to be tons and tons of these floating around out there. Again, 10 million copies. This isn't like a video game cartridge, right, which had much smaller print numbers. We're talking about video cassettes here. 10 million, 11 million, these are huge numbers. Right? Aladdin and the King of Thieves, what is this, the third Aladdin movie? 10 million copies. It's just absolutely incredible that people would think that these sealed tapes are going to be worth anything. Of course, at the end of the day, the only people who win are the auction houses and the graders. So VHSDNA and IGS and whoever else wants to jump in this game. These are the people that are actually making a lot of money off this. But if you send Batman in to get graded and encapsulated, I promise you, we're going to see a lot of these things pop up in the future. Because now people think that these sealed copies have a lot of value. But just take this into consideration, people. 10.5 million copies. That's incredible. Alright guys, so there's something else I guess I should show. So Cole, of course, is in this video here from, of course, Goldin. So you can't say there's no relationship there. Obviously, they're on their account, they're uploading videos with Cole and VHSDNA in there. But I found this video be very interesting because he just gets so many facts wrong, and we're going to actually point out the two biggest errors in his judgment or just lack of knowledge. And so let's look at this Let It Be tape.
This came out right before the band broke up, so they had to recall most of these out of the retail stores and pull them off the shelves, so that makes this a little rarer.
That is just stupidity. Of course, the Beatles broke up in 1970. 70, right? VHS, let's start with Betamax. Betamax didn't enter the US market until 1975. VHS didn't enter the market until October of 1977. Magnetic Video didn't create that first 20th Century Fox deal until, July 1977. So many things are wrong. He's so far off. Where does he get this information from? The reason why Let It Be was never re-released on home video in the United States was simply because it made the band look bad. It was damaging to their reputation and to their brand. It's as simple as that. The band decided that, maybe we shouldn't put this out there anymore. They've mentioned that in interviews. That's why we didn't see it. It wasn't recalled. I don't know where he gets this information from. I just never read anywhere that the video was actually recalled. It's just stupid as hell. There's also a point in here, I don't know if I could specifically find it, in this video with him.
Royal Tenenbaum. You've got a first edition Halloween here.
Alright guys, so if you're a horror VHS collector, you know that this is not a first release of Halloween on VHS. Here's a guy that calls himself an expert and grades your videotapes based on his so-called expertise, and he still doesn't know what he's talking about. So here we have Halloween Media Home Entertainment release. So originally, Meta Media Home Entertainment, MEDA, was created by Charles Band, and he launched it in February of 1978 with his wife, Meta. That's where the name comes from. Meta was his wife's first name at the time. In fact, she is pictured on some of the promotional material for Meta. And so when they first launched the brand, everything had the Meta logo on it, MEDA. So this is the initial run. And Halloween was one of those initial tapes. I mean, maybe not at launch of the Meta brand, but while Charles Band was still in control of the company, it was called Meta, and he did release Halloween on VHS. But that very first VHS release has the Meta logo, not the Media logo. So when they started using the Media logo, that's when Charles Band was kind of felt pressured and squeezed out of his own company. And when that company took over, they just called it Media instead of Meta. A little bit of information that Cole probably is not aware of, doesn't know. But certainly this Media version of Halloween, as cool as it is, it's still an older version. It's not the first release. And so there's another release, an early release of Halloween Meta, and it actually uses a generic cardboard sleeve with a black and white image of the Halloween poster as you see here, and it's glued to the box. I've only ever seen one of these pop up anywhere. This could possibly be the very, very first release of Halloween. But at best, the one that Cole is showing you is a second release of Halloween. It's certainly not the first. So I just wanted to point that out. Clearly, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's doing, doesn't know anything. I keep telling you guys, these guys are not experts, they're not reputable. Cole bought most of these movies that are in this video that we're looking at now. He bought most of them within the past couple of years. Look, they're all sealed. It looks like many of them are sealed. So when he decided to do this, he just went out into the market, took all this money that he invested, and just went on a shopping spree for sealed tapes because he wanted to inflate the market. That's my opinion, right? So I think it's obvious when you watch this video that's exactly what happened. And you really have to watch interviews with him, right, to get a little bit more, because he is pretty open. If there's one interview on YouTube right now, and it's about, I think, like an hour and a half long interview, it's very in-depth, and I want to go through it and discuss it a lot more. So it looks like he has just this little section in his so-called collection for actual rare tapes. You can see Wizard, and you can see a few Midnights, but that's about it. Of course, he's showing off the sealed stuff again. Sealed Nightmare on Elm Street. So many of these were mass-produced. In fact, it was such a hit movie because, of course, Media Home Entertainment was a co-producer or a financier of A Nightmare on Elm Street. And so they really pumped these tapes out. So there's a lot of these sealed Nightmare on Elm Street tapes out there. So don't be fooled into thinking they have any sort of significant value. But as you can see, Cole has two here, one here, some stacked up in here. I mean, he just went out there and just started buying up everything sealed. And at the time, before grading was anything, these things were really cheap. They were only a few bucks. Now, he has a bunch of sealed copies, and he's probably going to grade them and try to sell them. I mean, you don't need this many copies of the same movie. You can actually see some more back here. You don't need this many copies of the same movie unless you plan to sell them and make a lot of money. So what is that? That's a conflict of interest, of course, right? I'm speculating here. I can't say that with certainty, but to anybody, that just seems to be exactly what's happening here. Cole is, in fact, a huge movie buff, but he has said in interviews he hates horror movies, he doesn't like them, they actually scare him. So a lot of the videos that actually do have some really good collectible value aren't in his collection, except for a few that he has down here. right? The horror titles, exploitation titles, things like this. You really don't see those in his collection. And I think that says a lot about him, because it's not really about the love of VHS, it's about being an investment. No one needs this many copies of a movie unless they plan to do something with them to make a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, there are some quirky collectors out there that will focus on one particular release of a movie because I guess they think it's funny. They want to be that guy that has 100 releases of a particular movie, whatever. But Cole, as you can see, will have 10, 20, 30 copies of variety of movies sealed. This should be very alarming to people, should be very alarming to collectors, and also it just makes him a big a-hole. Like, why are you going to hoard all these movies that can be collected by fellow collectors? If you're a true collector and you love this hobby, why hoard all these copies of movies, right? Unless you have some sort of ulterior motive. That's just my opinion. In my collection, I have maybe a few doubles. I don't really have many. And I don't really find a need to have them. I know to each their own. Some people might want to have a bunch of a particular release, but it's really abnormal to have 10, 20 releases of the same movie, especially movies that you don't even like. We know Cole does not like horror movies. Why does he have 10, 15 sealed copies of Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th? It doesn't make sense. People have to wake up and see that this guy is a sham. I don't know what else to say about this, but anyway, just a recap, because this has been a long video, a long rant. As you can see, these listings for these high-priced Star Wars tapes are deceptive. Deceptive information on the grades, deceptive auction listings in the titles, as you can see. Like I said before, these 1984 releases mention it being a first release, first print, whatever you want to call it. Very scary thought. And even if they meant first release 1984, it's still very deceptive. You're playing games. No one cares about a first release of 1984. They care about a first release of 1982, the very, very first release, of course. So I really hope if actual people actually paid these prices who weren't on the inside, as we know is a thing because it happened with heritage auctions, but if actual people, collectors, paid these prices, I hope they come across my video and see how much they were scammed out of their money. I really hope so, because that's just my opinion. People don't put any faith in VHSDNA, IGS. We already exposed IGS for being morons, I guess. Grading bootlegs. How worse can you get? Grading bootlegs. As far as I know, at least Cole hasn't graded any bootlegs, but maybe you could say that grading the bootleg was a mistake, even though it'd take a complete moron not to notice that the Seed of Chucky VHS was in fact a bootleg, but still, putting these little stickers on these as a first edition, not a first edition. And no one cares at all that it's a first edition 1984. Nobody absolutely cares. I don't know anyone who cares. Here's the funny thing with these things. Even if people out there who are getting these VHS tapes graded, even if they don't trust VHSDNA or they don't trust IGS, if they still think they can make a few bucks by getting their video graded, they'll do it anyway. Because these people are investors. They're speculators. They're not collectors. Collectors care, but speculators really don't. They just care about the money. As long as it seems that people are paying a lot of money for these graded tapes, you're still going to have investors that are going to use these grading services because it'll bring them money. Even if these grading services have no reputation, have no experience or expertise in this area, they'll continue to use them. And we already demonstrated that certainly Cole is not an expert at all because he thinks the Beatles broke up in, 1980 or something, when in fact they broke up in 1970, way before home video market even exploded. I think, the U-matic Sony system came out in 1970, and I think the Cartervision system came out in 1971, so this was way before home video even took hold. He is totally wrong on that. Alright guys, so I don't really know what else to say here. I thought I'd make maybe one more video on grading, one or two. I'm just getting kind of sick of the topic, but if anything does pop up, if you guys find any other bad grades or things that are worth commenting on, let me know and I'll make a video on it if time permits, or if I find it worth making a video on. But anyway guys, this has been Paul with VHScollector.com, your analog archivist, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks.